Yeah, so I guess where do we want to take this? Hardware wallets. I usually travel around with a whole bag of hardware wallets if anyone see me, but I don't have a bit key on me, unfortunately, today.
I do.
I think somebody does.
Excellent. I got here, you can just hold these.
Oh, look at that. Oh, it's on. I'm gonna take your money.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess really just to jump it off, I think just talking about, it's funny talking about ETH just as a jump off point. The biggest topic of conversation over the past few months in TradFi and in insurance too has been the Bybit hack, and just talking about Ethereum smart contracts and how they fundamentally differ from Bitcoin and how money gets spent. And I think it just goes to a primitive of security first in Bitcoin and not doing all the fancy shiny things and making sure you can look at your transaction, like knowing what you're doing before you're just sending money off into the ether.
Yeah, I mean, like, you know, if you've been in Bitcoin for long enough, you remember the days where you lost a lot of Bitcoin to like paper wallets, non-BIP32 wallets, and there were no hardware wallets, and you had to just trust the transaction that was on the screen of the computer, and there was a lot of money being sent to the wrong place. So hardware wallets happen, and we can verify those transactions on screen, except for ETH, because their contracts are ginormous hash that you pay to. And how you can't read that.
I actually did a side by side. You first have to, if you're doing a more advanced smart contract, the first thing you have to do is enable blind signing. This is using the ledger. So you have to ultimately say, I'm not going to verify transaction details. You're just going to give me a hash and you're going to sign it. And then if you're in a multi-sig, it's like your key, the key that's on the ledger, and then the other two, the multi-sig contract. And then you hit accept, risk, and send on the that's on the ledger screen. It says accept, risk, and send, and that's how the Bybit hack happened, because they just blind signed a hash and they said, well, it looks good on my screen, and then no one in parallel constructed the hash to make sure, like, where am I sending this money to?
And it's not even address poisoning.
No,
it's
not.
Just like complete just spy.
Yeah, it's wild, because you'd think after 5 years, this is like using the safe protocol on ETH. Like they could have built more tooling to do this. They just chose not to. And I think it goes to like Bitcoin minded engineering, where like very Grug brain, like, no, how much money am I sending to what addresses, accept or deny?
Well, there's also not that many complex transaction types that most Bitcoin users are doing. We just sat through a talk with a crazy graph of transactions for BitVM. People are talking about CTV things. Like, more sophisticated spend paths for Bitcoin are coming. This is a problem that we're going to have to solve in Bitcoin.
Bitcoin's perfect. There is no problem.
Yeah, right. It's all legacy script all the time. But you know, if you're actually signing like some giant mini script abomination, like, you're not going to be scrolling through hundreds of whatever, you know, your script is doing on a screen. Like, you're going to need something like whitelisted transaction templates that you load into your hardware wallet or something.
I mean, it is time we have whitelisted scripts.
Yeah.
Like white scripted scripts.org or something like that.
It's actually how Bitcoin originally worked, right? You had like a set templates of these kind of transaction types could be used. I thought that was like in the earlier, like in the Satoshi era, where they were like, you couldn't set any arbitrary script.
I mean, B2SH is really fun if you really want to make your own.
Well, that's what you mean. When you put the script behind a hash, now you don't know what it is. You're just putting a hash on chain. Yeah, I guess maybe even just talking about a little bit, like Jonathan, bring you into the conversation, like with the Bitkey and the design philosophy of like how you think about designing a product and helping people keep their Bitcoin safe.
Yeah, one of the things we like sort of anchor our ethos on is thinking about safety as like inclusive of security, but broader to include things like usability and foot guns, and sort of anything that you can make a mistake and lose your Bitcoin is like something we try to design around. And so OPSEC tends to be a pretty easy way to screw yourself. And so just trying to make that as easy for users as possible. And then one other thing I was going to jump in when you're talking about the screens, one of the things we're looking at is sort of in preparation for all of these super complex types of transactions is this idea of bringing your own screen. And so if we can provide a sort of a trusted compute environment that shows you the details of your transaction that is attestable, you could bring any screen, any sort of hardware device or Tails hardened setup and look at the attestations of what's being signed, and then you get a full screen experience and can really dive in.
Would that be a version of like signing, like you send over a payload in the bit key signs it. So then you have like a chain. Because I know like if you use the cold card, like you export addresses or you export information, the cold card will co-sign it, saying like, hey, it actually came from this data. And any time I see unsigned data that I have to trust and use,
yeah, it's detached signatures. That was born because I was exporting transactions and a safe list of addresses, right?
Right.
And I was like, okay, but I just brought that to my computer. My computer just probably just changed all those addresses.
Right.
So like, how do you check that the addresses that you brought over are safe?
Or the ones that you think.
Exactly, right? A great way to lose money is to trust the addresses you're sending to.
Ask Bybit.
I mean,
it's a valid transaction.
If you just don't send Bitcoin, then you can't lose it.
It works. Satoshi knows that.
Yeah, it's funny. The first wallet I built only had a received wallet. It was like the optimal.
I mean, it is non-consent. I mean, you know, Bitcoin is the only payment system that's non-consensual receive.
Yeah.
Really, there is nothing you can do to prevent somebody from sending you money. Should we show a QR now?
And so I guess like going to the future and thinking about new ways of kind of evolving the security in the ecosystem. I mean, Rijndael, you're talking about like more advanced, crazy miniscript stuff. I think it even gets more complex than that, right? If you're adding in new opcodes, covenants, like the moment now you have a CTV hash, like what are you committing to, right? You almost have to like bring extra data to the transaction and be like, so you're not just blind signing a hash. You don't want to reintroduce that problem.
I mean, you could sign something and then you show a QR, right, on the screen of the device. And then you have sort of like a mapping of some type of script that, you know, like it's safe. So you say, yes, that was what this thing is trying to sign. And then maybe you show some addresses or something. You know, like there is data there that you can work with. You just have to find a way of like shortening.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also easy to just have users get kind of screen blindness, where it's like you're scrolling through the same thing and you're like, I've checked 300 hex digits. Like, is this the right one? And so you have to make it like meaningful and comprehensible for people.
And I really wanted to map like things to words because we already have a full word set in the device, right? So no more lists, please. Same list, but you could map, I mean, to 2, 3, 4 words. It doesn't have to be the full, like, you don't need that much entropy for something like that. But it's just really to prevent mistakes, right? Or to prevent address poisoning or something like that. Totally. You know, you go like, hey, you know, these 2 words match those 2 words on Sparrow, you know, you're good to go.
Yeah. I mean, so talking about like breaking like arbitrary strings and text to words, Matt Corallo just released a code base to be able to take, I think it's bit 353 for DNS mapping, and it actually maps into the PSBT. And so like at the end of the day, I just view hardware wallet as a thing that just consumes output descriptors and PSBTs, right? It's looking at what wallet am I a part of and what am I validating, and like you're proposing a transaction, so a partially signed Bitcoin transaction, PSBT, and it's using a PSBT input field. There's a bunch of unused space in those PSBTs, and the idea is that you can anchor to a DNS record, and so instead of sending to a random string of characters, it could be NVK at
but
NVK.com.
But it needs to support DNSSEC, right? I
believe
mean, half of the GTLDs or shitcoin domains out there.
Not.
Wait, wasn't XYZ rugged on something like that? It's DNS is a shitcoin. We need to move past it. It's a Bitcoin review. It really is.
Yeah, this is really turning.
Yeah, I mean, like there is I think just like a general need for, you know, you have blessed or approved templates that you load in with some authorization data, and like whether that's specific descriptors or miniscript templates or and yeah, I mean, Cat is gonna make this better because it'll force everybody to. But you know, it could be addresses that you whitelist. I mean, I think it's like really interesting, especially if you start talking about either like vaulting use cases or other things where you have different cardinality of multi-sigs on different spend paths that might come with different time blocks, and understanding like exactly which of these things you're on and that you're not being tricked into like signing the wrong path.
When are we going to just even tone this down and just have signed PSBTs? You know, they'll help a lot.
Yeah, that actually probably would help a lot.
Yeah, one of the cool things about sort of that we can do on BitKey is because it's a collaborative custody setup and the server cosigns the transactions, we can set up policies on.
Yeah, it's a policy signer.
It's a policy signer, and so while it's not covenants, you get covenant-like features. And so it's been a really interesting place to see like what sort of features resonate with customers. And so things like delayed signing, wait 48 hours before co-signing, daily spend limits, address whitelisting.
Yeah, I mean, like I think velocity control is a pretty good.
It's the main one.
Yeah.
I mean, we have this feature that's been coming for a while, and we just can't ship just because we're so busy with other shit. But it's essentially like you make the hardware wallet have an extra key that is not user accessible, right? Or at least not on runtime, or we're still deciding a few things. But the point is the device can
space.
Yes, exactly. The device can co-sign with you.
Yeah.
So when you're traveling with this device, say you create a 2 out of 3, one stays behind on your plate somewhere backup, and you have one on the device, and then the device itself has a key, right? That is set, and you set velocity, you set whatever you want. The cool thing too is that aside from controlling that, it's plausibly deniable. So it actually doesn't appear on user space, except when you give it a PSPT that has a key that's in that extra key in there. And then the device go, oh, I recognize that PSPT. Would you like to sign it?
It's like port knocking.
Yeah.
I mean, like I think that sounds pretty cool. Like I know with BitKey, you can say, here's my daily spend limit. I want to spend $1,000 a day. You go out with just your phone, and like the phone and the server will sign, and it enforces a policy there. You could do other policies, like you could say, if I'm sending to a specific address, then it's a higher limit, or you could do like social spend ability or things like it. The thing that I like about policy signers generally is that I think we can experiment with some of these different covenant or covenant-like designs without actually needing to go upgrade the network, and then like see what people build and if we like it. And
I think I was going to say, the policy signer is kind of sort of the general primitive that we use. So like our inheritance system is based on, it can go to this key set, you can skip your limits and go to this key set only if, you've waited a certain amount of time or whatever. And so everything can kind of be distilled down to a policy.
It's vaulty, but
I think that the hard part is doing these things in a way that like it's vendor agnostic. Right, like that's really the key. Is like how do you do this in a way where like it could be any hardware signer, it could be any software wallet on the computer, because like creating things that are sort of like closed off in a specific environment is like sort of easy. Like having it work with every other Bitcoin sign, it's just because you designed it. It was easy.
It's not that easy.
It's easy.
Remote attestation in the cloud sucks.
But yes, the point is we need to find ways to have vendor agnostic solutions in Bitcoin, right? So, you can have an HSM that's co-signing your transactions with any signer, right? So you're not stuck with a vendor. I think that's the sort of like the challenge that's so pressing. And people are working on it, but it's hard.
It's definitely hard. I mean, to bring it a little bit back about like learning from user features, like on our side, we fundamentally are a co-signer, right? And I think that's kind of like a way.
I thought you guys were a mini script advocacy organization.
I thought you guys were an insurance company.
Right, insurance company. It's like a mullet. We're an insurance company in the front and
mini script in the back.
In the back.
Yeah. Part of being a startup is focus, right?
Well, of course,
you need to focus.
This is turning into an investor
meeting.
That's right. Yeah. So like. It's interesting though, because you get certain emergences, right? So for us, when we are able to materially identify that risk has been lowered, we can offer lower insurance premiums. And part of that is like people are hyper majority of our customers are opting in for what we call the HODL discount. So like, don't co-sign anything for the entire year. This is my deep cold storage, right?
I'll never sign it. Please, 10 years.
Well, yeah, we'll
lower my policy.
Right, exactly, right? So for today, we're using 1 year time locks because that's just the nature of a 1 year insurance contract. But turning into like, ultimately, the hardware wallet, you're just trying to make it more accessible and democratizing the HSM, right? That's what you're trying to do. You're trying to give this asymmetric power of cryptography in a way that you can safely kind of leverage and extend it. And I think something like the travel wallet like idea is something that allows people to be able to, you could see the PSBTs, you can see, oh, I last signed one at block height 1 million, and now it's block height 1,010,000. Okay, I'll sign the next one because you're enforcing that velocity logic within the device, and it keeps it like safe.
It's like the ephemeral grandmother doesn't exist. like, it's like Bitcoiners get very stuck on this two sort of sides of the curve. It's like, you have the crypto anarchist, which is well served now. We have amazing solutions for you. And then on this other side, you have the grandma, but like grandma's not going to use Bitcoin to buy coffee. Like really, she's going to use Amex. Like, and then you have this huge amount of people in the middle that want features. They don't want like the easiest thing in the planet. They want to be able to just function, right? Like when you open your online banking, you have like a checking account, you have a savings account, you have pay bills, you have transfer, you have all this crap, and it's all useful and all exports to you, like a CSV for your accountant and stuff. And people need that. The people who have the least amount of money need Venmo. Everybody else that has some money to do things, they actually want more. And I've been sort of like really trying to key in on this thing. It's like, I want our industry to just really build things for people that want to do more.
I mean,
yeah, I was just thinking, we were talking a minute ago about like policy signers. I really like policy signers. I put out some research this week about having a way to migrate over to like post covenant upgraded spend paths if you did a policy signer. It just occurred to me while we were talking that we have a nice portable format for moving partially signed Bitcoin transactions between like wallets and policy signers, and you can do that in like a device and software independent way. It's serializable. You can write it to disk. You can send it over the wire. It's like really nice format. Something that we don't have, because I think there haven't been that many widely deployed policy signers. Like I think the BitKey one is actually one of the most widely used policy signers in Bitcoin right now. Is we don't have a portable or standardized way of expressing policy. Yeah. Like all that policy in every policy signer is expressed as like application code.
It's broken.
Right. Yeah, like your Bitcoin just
vendor fields.
Your Bitcoin just
vendor specific
fields
that's,
on
the
descriptors. But this is like with the descriptor, right?
You're making the descriptor level.
There should be a descriptor level policy for. That's a really good point. That we don't have any encoding of whitelists, velocity logic, how those two interplay with each other.
And it's interesting, right? Because like you need a combination of transaction data. You usually need some off-chain data, because like if you're doing velocity control, you need to know like what else you've spent. So you need some other transactional data. And then you need some mechanism for actually like encoding the policy. So in other parts of like the software ecosystem, there are declarative policy languages. So, interesting project for somebody looking for something to do in open source Bitcoin. It might be interesting to figure out if there's like a good portable policy language built on like OPA or something that we could build that would make it so that you could like express your policy, vend it around with your PSBT, and then like load it into different hardware and software policy signers.
The policy should really be the descriptor, because it's like you said once,
but like descriptors are like stateless, right?
The descriptor,
but that's the thing. The policy is stateless.
Yeah, that's true. The policy is stateless.
Yeah, so you set the policy once.
Some of them.
Sure. I mean,
yeah.
Is this on?
Well, one of the
it's on.
Yeah, I've been hacked.
So we do a lot of work on the policy stuff. And there's some really cool things we ran into. But just to like, why we're so into policy signers is if you have two keys and the policy signer's a third, you can take your two keys, separate them, never bring them together, and then always sign in policy with the cosigner. And so from like a personal OPSEC position, you just don't ever bring your two keys together, and you're always under policy. And if you ever want to escape the policy, you go and get your keys. But the big downside about policy signers is the privacy.
Yeah.
And so one of the cool things we're working on is making policy signers private. And so that's
how does that work?
So there's a couple of steps to it. So there's the first one is blind signing. And so being able to sign a transaction without knowing the contents of that. And that's been around for a while. eCash uses that. But in order to make sure the policy is enforced, you have to provide a ZK proof of like, hey, even though you can't see what's in here, it is beholden to the policy that you've previously set up. And so the server can say, okay, well, the ZK proof is valid, so I'm going to blind sign.
Is that like in my wallet, I generate like a Stark or something that says this transaction would still be within my daily spend limit, and then I send like a blinded PSBT and the proof up to the server. server validates the ZKP and then says, cool, I'll sign this. Something
Yeah,
like that.
exactly.
Okay.
And then there's one more step that's a little tricky, which is even though it can blind sign, the way blind signing works is the signer doesn't see the transaction when they sign it, but they can recognize their signature down the road. And that's sort of by design based on the eCash use case where they wanted to vend coins privately and not be able to see who they're signing for. But when someone tries to redeem the coin, they can say, oh, this is my signature. This is a real coin.
So that would be for eCash.
Well, so what you can do though is you can actually do this thing we're calling chain code delegation, where the signer, the policy, the server never sees the chain code of your wallet. And so what they can do is they provide a signature, and then after it's been signed, you then tweak the signature so that you get a child key, and the signature stays valid, but the server is never aware of the actual signature produced. And so if you go and look on the blockchain later, you can't even find the things you signed for. And so that's how we can kind of get full privacy and policy signing together.
That sounds almost like a adapter signature adapter kind of thing. Like you tweak the signature and then you untweak it or something. That's cool.
You guys asleep?
This is just the whole audience is asleep.
Yeah, it's,
You can't see it on camera, but everyone's asleep.
How many of you listen?
I don't know
to
why
Bitcoin
Charlie
Directly?
did this after lunch.
Do we want to? Yeah, we have plenty. How much time do we have, Charlie?
Yeah, we normally need 3 hours.
We have 5 minutes. Yeah, let's do some questions.
I mean, it's for real.
Thank you. So I recently moved some ordinals around using my ledger. And then I get this scary, almost like it's exactly the same thing as the Bybit ledger. It's like unknown, what's the term? Unknown outputs something. Click here only if you are willing to. Yeah, it's a super scary, even like multi-page disclaimer I have to click through and then just blindly sign something and hope my ordinals do the thing I want them to do.
Wild.
Do we have any way, like, what's the plan there? Do we have to just go for the Ethereum solution and just say, fuck it, let's go? Or
I don't think so. I mean, so what would be great in something like an ordinals use case is, you know, the wallet that did that transaction construction, like if you're using Xverse or whatever, it knows the identity of the inputs to this transaction. It knows that you're sending your dick butt or whatever, right? So, you know, I could imagine now you'd have to get, you know, Ledger to support this, and you know, you want to standardize this so that you can use like the software wallet of your choice, the hardware signer of your choice. But you can imagine, you know, like adding in a PSBT, there's like some proprietary data fields that are unused. They're meant to be used by software or wallet vendors for like application specific information. You can imagine them saying like, you are sending your X to this address, or you are authorizing a swap, or you are listing your ordinal or something. Like there's some higher level semantic meaning of these transactions that it would be great if you could like carry that over to the signer.
You should be able to break it down too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, ideally you can break down the whole chain and sort of say, hey, you know, does this little hash match your weird thing?
Well, and
like,
you know, some software does this already. So like, you know, like Xverse wallet will show you like, these are the things that you're sending. These are the things that you're receiving. I think what we don't have is we don't have good interoperability to like get that information onto a ledger and then display it in a meaningful way. Yeah. YOLO.
You also could just write your own ledger firmware too, right? You could write, I know some people have done that. I know like the async guys did that for Lightning. Like they wrote their own ledger app within the ledger device and they coded up their custom logic to visualize all that stuff.
I mean, also like you're only sending 546 sats. Like, you know, that's an ordinals joke.
The question is, what does it look like to send to a
Jeremy?
CPV?
Jeremy, where are you?
To the principal's office, Jeremy Rubin. What does it look like to send to?
It's like,
to understand.
If you're sending to a CTV commitment, right? Like what does that commit to? I think is the actual question. Like, is this going to unroll to the right tree, or is this like sending it all to James? which can be massive.
So the way that I have worked on it in the past is that you would have like a program that's like a piece of like WebAssembly that you would know what it was compiled from somehow. Like maybe you have your build system compile and sign it. And then you have the arguments that you want to send to, which would be like the list of customers. And then you just put that in, and then it gives you the CTV hash out. And that would be the thing that you would sign. And if it's a piece of WebAssembly, then that's easy to like be like, okay, this is like the signed, attested piece of WebAssembly that generates the address for us. That's like maybe one way you would distribute that piece of software.
And then use like dependency pinning and like other just, hey, this is the hash of the software that I'm using.
Essentially YOLO. But yes, thank you.
Well, so like, I guess as an example, I had like a core RPC. You can just call it again as many times as you want. It's deterministic. So you can just recompute it from the data. I see what you're saying. Yeah, I mean, if you had like native like CTV compiling support, you could just write a very small program that would do like construct a hash tree and do like the music tweaking or whatever you wanted. That wouldn't be difficult to do like on device. You could write a very basic program.
How basic? Like can I put how much like memory do you need for that?
You don't need. It depends on like how if you need to put like 1 million users, then you need 1 million like addresses and amounts. But like
that the hardware just crap there. But
yeah, but if you
but like 10, 20.
You wouldn't need that much because you can generate like one hash at a time, and then you just need to like queue them, take out a couple, put them at the back of the queue, take out a couple, put them in the back of the queue, and you can build a balanced tree that way. So it's relatively like small.
Bitcoin's perfect. So
hey, so we use hardware wallets for Bitcoin all the time, and most hardware wallets are specific for Bitcoin. But actually, a lot of what we secure with our hardware wallet is actually stablecoins. And I know a lot of other people use their hardware wallets for stablecoins as well. How do you get a good hardware wallet that really supports all of the Bitcoin stuff that we want to do, CTV and all these other things, multi-sig, but also be able to sign a USDT transaction on Tron or something?
Not going to happen.
Not possible?
Nope.
In my opinion,
really,
that's
like,
not an answer.
So like when you're designing, like it's because they are very like they're completely diametric, sort of like kinds of technologies, right? So for USDT, it's essentially Ethereum, right? So
or Tron or Solana or whatever.
Ethereum.
Yeah.
It's like some version of that crap running many or just one server. You go, too bad the image is gone. But I get the need, right? But we can't do it because, see, when you're building a good wallet, a good hardware wallet, it's based on the actual Bitcoin technology itself, right? So, for example, Cold Card only knows how to talk PSBTs. PSBTs are partially signed Bitcoin transactions, and the Bitcoin there is very important. So it's like to the nature of how Bitcoin works is how that the device reads that file in order to understand how to sign it, right? You can't do that with Ethereum, right? There is no PSBT for Ethereum, so you'd have to use a shitcoin hardware wallet for that, because what they do is they essentially generalize everything, right? So that they can sign everything. Varying degrees of shittiness, but like, it's a hard problem. I mean, like, my heart goes out to them. They're making a lot of money on this, but it is just like if you're going to support multiple types of technology, you have to create essentially a general purpose type computer, right? And that's how those systems work.
Well, you basically have to build a Bitcoin wallet and an Ethereum wallet, and then you just put them in the same enclosure.
Exactly. And it doesn't fit. So like Ledger, for example, right? There's only so many apps you can have in that device as well, right? And then you run into problems where, you're building all this other crap and you need 50,000 people to build all this other crap and maintain it, right? And now you're opening yourself for security issues because, you have a bunch of other code that needs to exist in a secure environment. It's a very hard problem.
How real is stable coins on Taproot assets?
Where's Ryan?
Yeah.
There he is.
It's very real.
It's very real.
There we go.
Do you have a t-shirt that says and confirms that? But that you can't put that in a hardware wallet either, right?
Because it's Taproot asset.
No, you can.
Yeah, no, sure. Yeah.
You can settle the
be on an app,
USDT
right? Like,
on chain, right? So it could be a UTXO.
That's great. So there you go. Problem resolved.
USDT on Lightning.
Bitcoin's perfect.
Taproot assets.
Man, somebody's gonna do like a USDT Taproot asset ordinal wallet and make a killing.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Terrible.
The brain really goes to the gutter
Yeah.
on this one.
All right, I have a quick comment and then a question. And the comment is, we're talking about whether you can verify like a CTV in a hardware wallet. If you can verify sending to a Taproot address, you can verify sending to CTV. Taproot addresses are more complex to verify than a CTV tree of transactions. So it's, I mean, the degree of complexity inside of that tree can vary in either one. And so a Taproot asset with its sparse tree can be very hard to verify, and a CTV with a deep tree can be hard to verify, but it's hashing kind of similarly for either one.
But at least we have UTXOs.
I mean, in both
Ethereum
cases-
doesn't have UTXOs.
Oh, right. CTV and Taproot assets are fundamentally more verifiable than Ethereum.
Exactly, right. So that's really part of that sort of like our base, the stuff that we have the base to work with is already much better in that sense. You know, we make a lot of trade-offs in Bitcoin versus the shitcoins, right? You don't have accounts. But you know, we do gain a lot of this sort of like very Grug brain way of looking at transactions, right? Like it's like, this is my coin, it's going to this other coin, right? Like it's a nice primitive.
And then totally new topic. Have any of you guys looked at the Tropic Square open source secure element? How's it looking?
You go first.
I was okay. There is not a single secure element on the market that does SecP in hardware.
Correct.
And I was really hoping that
it was their only job.
They had
it was one job.
And I'm thrilled that there's more open hardware. I wish they had done the thing that we all really wanted.
It's like it's interesting hardware. Like super props to them for actually trying to
hardware is
do
hard.
that.
Like
it really is. Making chips is not an easy thing. Especially making secure chips is like essentially like 100% chance you're gonna get owned. It's just like how fast, right? So they need a few versions in the market to sort of prove that. It's missing SecP. I mean, you know, come on, guys. That one job, right?
Yeah,
right.
all of the elliptic curve happens in the MCU because the secure elements themselves can't do operation.
It supports P256.
Well, I mean, but here's the thing, though.
Bad
like,
one.
There is something beautiful about doing all the Bitcoin computation with reproducible code on the MCU, right? Like, if your threat model does not include like some crazy side channel stuff during runtime, right? Like, you're pretty safe, knowing that when it's at rest, really where it's a lot of the issues happen, you know, it's safe. I mean,
just use an air gap laptop.
What?
Just use an air gap laptop.
Exactly, right? Because what could happen?
Yeah.
Ask Luke.
If you're not worried about the side channels, like it's fine.
Ouch.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what the CIA said on the story. I mean, they have a building nearby. We should go ask.
On that note, I gotta wrap it up. Rob, Rijndael, FBK, Jonathan.